Marvel's Shang-Chi, is it Shang-Chi? Shang-Chi? Marvel's Shang-Chi is a breath of fresh air from the typical MCU films in some aspects, but it still suffers from the usual tropes that plagues these MCU films. I certainly enjoyed the film and I thought it was very good, much better than Marvel's most recent entry, Black Widow, which was meh. And it's probably amongst the better origin films and better MCU films in general. So this is the good, the bad, and the Wenwu. This video may contain spoilers, so you've been warned, but I shall put a warning whenever I am spoiling something, so you can just mute or something like that. So yeah, let's go.
Take your place by my side.
Tony Leung's Wenwu was by far the best character in this movie, and I think he makes this movie what it is. His performance was amazing, character itself was terrifying, charming, but at the same time quite understandable. When I think about going back to watch Shang-Chi again, I'm thinking about Wenwu. This movie wasn't as much his movie as it was Shang-Chi. Like, you get his backstory, you understand who he was, how he got there, you understand who he is now, you understand his problems, you understand what he values, and you understand why he's essentially the main villain. His interactions with his children are complex, they show you both the strength and flaws of his character, and whether you agree with him or not, you have some sympathy for him. Tony Leung carries like a presence whenever he's on screen that just makes any time he is there so much more interesting and you're just so invested. I feel like it's becoming a common trait now. When these villains get a lot more shine and a lot more time in these movies, say for example Thanos in Infinity War, they just tend to be better characters, they tend to be better villains, and they just tend to be more likable. This is the exact same case here with Wenwu. This movie by far had the best choreography and fighting in the whole of the MCU because it was different, it had style, it had origin, it had influence, and it breaks away from the usual quite basic hand-to-hand combat we've seen throughout these movies. You had many different martial arts that obviously came from real life stuff, and there was this one style, and I don't know what it's called, where these two combatants are looking like they're dancing with each other, and it's just something completely different. The movie clearly took inspiration from films like the ones Jackie Chan used to star in, where, you know, he used his environment and props to his advantage. Say for example the scaffolding scene that has been released on YouTube, where he's using the people as like pathways, he's using the floors like a seesaw to hit his enemies whilst, you know, dropping and escaping. It was a blast to watch in an MCU film, and what it did, it gave the film its own unique identity, and that is something that's been severely lacking.
Shang-Chi.
Shang.
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 S-H-A-N-G. Shang.
I love Shang-Chi and Katy's relationship, but more importantly, I love the fact they kept it platonic. From the get-go, you believe these two have been friends for many years, they have many stories to tell, and they actually care for one another purely platonically. They do a lot of things friends would do, such as karaoke, they bounce off each other, and their relationship is just generally believable. There is one point in the film where someone actually asks when are they going to get married, but it's just a little joke, they never go back to it, and their relationship never really develops any further than friends. The story on the whole was good, and even when looking at individual stories, namely Shang-Chi and Wenwu, the arcs were entertaining, relatable and emotional. The film did a good job of making you care for these characters and got you invested into the final conclusion. The mystical aspect really adds a new element to the MCU and expands upon the universe without overshadowing nor clashing with the existing world. Not only is it about the world, but the underlying theme of the story is about grief and how we cope with loss. Each member of Shang-Chi's family essentially deals with it differently from each other, and it's this very difference that causes conflicts amongst them. The 10 rings, and when I mean 10 rings, I mean the actual rings itself, they've been changed from their comic book counterparts due to similarities between it and the Infinity Stones, and their change in my opinion was well done. They lost their individual powers and identity in favour of operating more as a collective, but the way they were used by Wenwu integrated so well with the martial arts. When he used them, they were like an extension of his fighting style rather than changing it completely, and I just love how powerful yet subtle they were. As much as I did like the story, I felt like the third act is a massive CGI fest and it ditches the grounded, more martial arts focused film in favour of just a big, flashy spectacle that it felt like an entirely different movie. I don't understand why they did that, because it took away from the best parts of the film, and that was like the family drama, the theme of abandonment, and so on. And it's a common thing with Marvel where the last battle has to just scale up and make it feel so big, but they actually forget what they've built upon to get to that point throughout the whole movie. I've said many times that Wenwu was the best character in the whole movie, but his character arc ending I felt could have been better. It wasn't terrible, in fact it was better than I thought it would go considering it is an MCU movie, but it just didn't do justice to his character, his story, and his arc in general. And to add further context, I will step into spoiler territory, so whilst this warning is up, you've been warned. Basically, Wenwu is being manipulated by a voice in his head that sounds like his wife, telling him to open a mystical gate as she is being held captive behind it. Throughout the movie, he demonstrates that his main desire is his wife, and he essentially neglected to love his kids and treated them quite harshly after her death. So in the end, when he does die, and yes he does die, in his final moments he seems to realize his mistake and how his wife is living on through his kids and how he technically should have been there for them, but then he's quickly killed off. Now, I personally would have liked to see him try and rectify his mistakes and be there for his children, maybe fight alongside them, and he could still die in the process, but at least after trying to make amends. And that's when he would eventually give Shang Chi the 10 rings.
We make a good team!
Once again, the MCU confused fun with funny and continue to litter their movies with quote-unquote jokes. I don't mind some humour, and there were generally some funny moments and one-liners in this film, but the jokes now are becoming lazy, they're becoming predictable, and they're coming quite repetitive. My biggest problem is where the humour is placed, right? Because you have some scenes where they're having a big battle for the fate of the world, everything's quite serious, you're trying to build up that tension, and they will cut away from that battle to go to some scene that's completely irrelevant, to make a joke, to come back to the battle. And it's like, why was that necessary? It is quite annoying. It's very annoying. It's one of the biggest pet peeves I have with these films. There was a scene in particular where Shang-Chi was explaining his childhood, right? And it was just basically interrupted by a unfunny, long and drawn out joke. And so any tension or anything that was built up in general from that childhood story had just gone. It just felt insignificant. It felt like it kind of wasn't important because they followed it up with a stupid joke that had no relevance. It didn't need to be there. I went with about 8 of my friends, and every time one of them stupid jokes happened, they would look over to me because they knew I ain't like them. I ain't like them. Cut them out. Now this one is just basically going to be spoiler territory, so I'm just going to leave the warning up for now. But I felt like some of these characters were wasted. More specifically, I think his name is Death Dealer, the one who basically trained Shang-Chi, and he had a very personal relationship with Shang-Chi that led to Shang-Chi basically having a vendetta, something against him, right? And he felt like he was going to be a prominent character and a prominent person in Shang-Chi's story, but he wasn't, and he didn't have no dialogue, and he basically got murked off very quick. I don't think Shang-Chi even confronted him, despite having these flashbacks about him, and it was just a bit of a waste. Now, this one I added on very, very late when making this video, and that's the sort of training aspect of these films, right? Because these are special martial arts, these are special styles, and it takes a lot of skill. More time these people have been training their whole lives, all these years, but when a new person comes along, they find it so easy to learn something that took someone else ages to learn. Whether that be a fighting style, a technique, it sort of discredits the technique or the style, and it discredits anyone who spent time learning it, because it's like, you man spent all this time and man could do it now. For continuity's sake, for reputation's sake, I don't think you should be doing that. Other than that, I feel like the film was much better than expected. The cinematography, the characters, the locations, they were all great. And like I said, the main biggest thing about this film, other than Wenwu, is the fact that it felt like it had its own identity. And I think that is sorely missed in the MCU, where a lot of the films feel the same old, just feel like a machine churning out these movies. This one had style, it had culture, it had origin, it had influence, and it was just so refreshing to see. And I'm hoping that we get more like this. I want to see directors' visions and directors' art come through these movies and give them their own identity, let them be their own thing, but then still connect them to an extended universe. That's fine. And let this be a lesson, yeah? We need more villain stories. The villain stories are the best. I'm sorry, yeah? They are the best. Whether they die in the end or whether they don't, I just want to see more things that that are driven by the villain in terms of what they're doing and how they influence the whole story. If you've seen Shang-Chi, let me know what you thought about it in the comments. Certainly a good film. I would recommend it, even though, you know, I'm a certified MCU hater. It is one of the better entries in terms of an origin story. It's been your boy Sly, and we out.